Alexander and the Magic Mouse by Martha Sanders. There was once an old lady who lived in a house on top of a hill. It was the only hill for miles around. At the foot of the hill was the river, and on the other side of the river was the town. After that, as far as the eye could see, there was only the great empty prairie. The old lady was never lonely, for she lived with her animal friends. A brindle London squatting cat, a magical mouse, an alligator from China, and a yak, you may think, is a strange household, but they got along together very well. It is true that brindle London squatting cat, when he was not squatting in the sun on the doorstep, spent a great deal of time thinking about how to catch the magical mouse. But the magical mouse just made herself invisible and never got caught. Each day, the old lady put out magical mouse food for the magical mouse, and each day the brindle London squatting cat got ready to catch her. But the magical mouse had been invisible for so long that the brindle London squatting cat had really forgotten what to look for, and he's always fell fast asleep in his hiding place. Alexander the alligator had a mirror which the old lady had given him, and he liked to walk back and forth slowly in front of it, as so to admire his smile. His smile was almost 3 feet long, and it took quite a while to admire it enough. On warm days, Alexander would waddle down the hill to the river and go for a swim near a sign the old lady had put up. It said, "Beware the dangerous alligator." That was to keep people away. Alexander was not dangerous at all, but the old lady did not want him to frighten anyone. There were too many people who could not tell the difference between an alligator who was smiling and an alligator who was not smiling. But Alexander always hoped that if he smiled enough, people would understand how much he liked them. Sometimes when he was swimming, he would poke his head above water and smile beautifully in case anyone should be near. But a few people he saw always cried, "Help!" and ran away. That made Alexander very sad. As for the yak, she was a lovely lady yak, who gave each day 1.5 quarts of yak milk, which was very rich and sweet and could be made into yak butter and yak cream. As everyone knows, the Tibetans always put a little yak butter in their tea to improve the flavor. The yak romped in the orchard and galloped up and down the hill. In the summer, she always brought the old lady a lovely fly swatter, with which she had braided from the long hairs of her tail. And the magical mouse? She came with the house. She had always been there. The animals loved the old lady dearly. In her youth, the old lady, who was then a young lady, had been a great traveler. She went to many far lands. From each of her favorite places, she wanted to bring something home. Not just a souvenir, but something really beautiful and interesting. So she asked the brindle London squatting cat if he would come from England, and the alligator if he would come from China, and the yak if she would come from Tibet. And so the friends all lived together along with the magical mouse. Each afternoon at 5, the old lady rang a shiny bell. Tea was served. All the animals came into the drawing room and sat down together and had tea and cakes and told what happened that day. The brindle squatting cat had to promise not to try and catch the magical mouse during tea time. All the same, the magical mouse made herself invisible She never took chances. The old lady would put a bit of cake on the table near the knitting basket, and presently it would be gone. Sometimes, as the cake was disappearing, the brindle London squatting cat would forget himself and raise a paw over the place. Then the old lady would look at him disapprovingly and say, "Now, now," and he would put his paw down again, frowning. One fine afternoon in May, as they had all just sat down to tea, the old lady was about to ask them to tell their adventures. A tiny voice came from the knitting basket. Everyone was so surprised, for the magical mouse was shy and never spoke unless she had something very important to say. They waited in silence. Then the magical mouse squeaked, "It is going to rain for 30 days and 30 nights. My tail tells me so, and my tail is never wrong. We must get ready." The old lady got up and went to the window. There was not a cloud in the sky. "Are you sure?" she asked. "My tail tells me so, and my tail is never wrong," said the magical mouse, and that was all she would say. Her feelings were hurt. She refused to tell when the storm would begin. "Let us think," said the old lady, sitting down again. "We must have plenty of wood to burn, and plenty to eat, a great many books and games to amuse ourselves with." Then they all bustled about. The alligator brought logs of wood in from the woodpile. The yak dug up a large supply of vegetables from the garden. The old lady looked up at the cupboards to be sure there was plenty of flour and molasses and marmalade and strawberry jam and pickled watermelon and ginger tea. Everyone worked hard except the brindle London squatting cat, who finished his cake and went to sleep. That night they went to bed feeling snug and safe rather than excited. They had gotten ready just in time, for early the next morning it began to rain gently. By lunchtime the drops were coming down hard and fast. They built a cheerful fire, and the old lady read sea stories out loud. It was like a holiday. From time to time they looked out the window at the gray rain falling and falling. What a splendid storm! They felt adventurous themselves, as if the house were a tall ship that they were bravely keeping afloat. Oh, all that rain. But in the middle of the night, the old lady suddenly got up and lighted a candle and went downstairs to the drawing room. "Magical mouse! Magical mouse!" she whispered. From between the sofa cushions came a sleepy squeak. "Magical mouse, do you suppose they know down in town that it's going to rain for 30 days and 30 nights? Surely the river will flood over its banks and wash the town away unless the people try and stop it." "No one knows but us," said the magical mouse, and that was all she would say. A tiny snore came between the sofa cushions. The old lady shook her head in a worried way as she tiptoed back downstairs. "We must warn the people in town," the old lady said at breakfast the next day, "for surely if it rains for 30 days and 30 nights, the river will flood over its banks and wash the town away." Quickly she put on her knitted snood and her red flannel leggings with the brass buttons and her black rubber galoshes, and got out her imitation fur muff and her umbrella. And the old lady went out to the door, but she was soon back. "Too slippery," said the old lady. "You could write a note," said the yak. "I'll go. I can run down the hill in any weather." Yes, a note to the mayor," the old lady said. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Mayor, I'm very sorry to tell you that it is going to rain for 30 days and 30 nights. Surely the river will flood over its banks and wash the town away unless you can think of how to stop it. Sincerely yours, the old lady on top of the hill." The yak took the note in her teeth and trotted out the door, but she was soon back. "The bridge is washed out," said the yak, "and I can't cross the river." "Then I'll go," said Alexander, "for I can swim any river." "Be careful, Alexander," said the old lady. She put the letter in his mouth, and off he went. He slid down the muddy hill on his stomach, right into the river. He began to swim, holding his head up high so the letter would not grow wet. The river was twice as wide as it normally is, and the water was dirty and cold. Alexander swam as hard as he could, but the river was terribly strong. He swam and swam and swam. He thought he was going to be washed away completely. He puffed and panted and snorted. At last he reached the other side and crawled up on the bank. But where was the town? Alexander had been washed right past it, and now he had to walk back. It was a long way, and it was not easy for an alligator to walk even a short way. He trudged along, shivering and tired from his hard swim. Finally, he saw Main Street ahead. A man with an umbrella was hurrying down the street through the rain. Alexander went up to him smiling to ask where the mayor lived, but the man dropped his umbrella and ran down the street shouting, "Help! Help!" Alexander shook his head sadly, but then he saw a lady. He smiled at her even more beautifully, but she gave a scream and ran inside a store for safety. Then everyone on the street saw Alexander. They all yelled and screamed and dropped their umbrellas and ran away shouting, "Help! Help!" Oh, golly, all those people are running away. Alexander was left all alone. He was ready to cry. He sat down on the empty sidewalk. Tears rolled down both of his cheeks, though they didn't show in the rain. Soon, a little boy came splashing along, enjoying the puddles. Alexander smiled sadly at him through his tears. The little boy stopped. He said, "Hello, what's the matter?" "Hello," said Alexander. "I've got to find someone who will give an important message to the mayor. Do you know where he lives?" "Yes, everyone does. He lives at the end of the street," said the little boy. "Would you give him this letter?" Alexander asked, opening his mouth very wide. "Sure," said the little boy, reaching in and pulling out the envelope. "Oh, thank you so much," said Alexander. "Don't forget." "I won't. Goodbye," cried the little boy as he ran down the street towards the mayor's house. Meanwhile, in the house on top of the hill, the old lady walked up and down, up and down. Night had fallen, and still Alexander had not come back. Where could he be? The animals were all silent. "I'm hungry," grumbled the brindle London squatting cat at last. "Let's have dinner." The house seemed very gloomy. After dinner, the yak and the cat played checkers in front of the fire. The old lady kept going to the door and looking out into the rainy night. Finally, it was bedtime. It was very gloomy indeed. The old lady could not sleep. In the middle of the night, she got up and lighted a candle and went downstairs to the drawing room. "Magic Mouse! Magic Mouse!" she whispered. A tiny squeak came from inside the piano. "Magic Mouse, is Alexander safe?" The old lady's voice trembled. "I think so," said the Magic Mouse sleepily, and that was all she would say. The next morning, the rain was pouring down as usual. The old lady went up to the topmost tower of the house and looked out with her telescope. At first she could see nothing but rain, but then she thought she saw people down by the river. They were building something, a wall made of bags of sand, so the mayor had received her letter. But where in the world was Alexander? All morning she looked through the telescope, hoping to see him. The brindle London squatting cat had come up the winding stairs to remind her it was lunchtime. In the afternoon, the old lady went back to the tower. Now she saw a frightful thing. The sandbag wall was higher, but the river was higher too. Which would win, the wall or the river? By 5 o'clock, it was too dark to see any more. She was just about to ring the small shiny bell for tea when the old lady thought she heard a sound at the door. It was a wet scratching sound. She rushed to the door and flung it open. There was Alexander. He was muddy and cold and tired and hungry. He had no sooner come inside than he began to sneeze. "Quickly, a towel and some hot ginger tea," cried the old lady. They dried him off and gave him some tea and supper and put him to bed. But he kept on sneezing. No one would say so, but everyone was worried. Alexander was sick. The next morning, before anyone else was awake, the old lady tiptoed up to the topmost tower to see if the wall by the river was still there. She looked down through the telescope and saw a huge wave coming down the river from far away. The flood, it came nearer and nearer, but the townspeople had made the wall thick and high. The old lady held her breath. The wave came to the wall. The wave almost covered the wall. It almost went right over the top, but not quite. "Hooray!" cried the old lady, as the wave went down the river, and the town would be safe, and she went to tell Alexander the good news. But Alexander did not answer. He did not even smile. The old lady felt his forehead. It was very hot. "Oh dear," she said. "Oh dear," whispered the cat to the yak, who had come to see how Alexander was. The old lady made more ginger tea. The yak made yak butter especially in it. Even the brindle London squatting cat did his part. He lay on Alexander's bed to keep his tail extra warm, but the magical mouse could not be found. That night, long after everyone else was asleep, the old lady sat beside Alexander's bed, ready in case he should want anything. At last she got up and went downstairs. Magical mouse, where are you?" she whispered. "Asleep," came a squeak from the chandelier. "But magical mouse, how can I help Alexander?" "Look on the tea table," said the magical mouse. There lay a tiny white cake. On it was written in pink sugar letters, "For Alexander." "Oh, thank you, magical mouse," whispered the old lady, and she tiptoed upstairs again. She gently opened Alexander's mouth and put the tiny cake inside. He swallowed it and smiled, dreaming it was tea time. The next morning it was as rainy as ever, but Alexander felt so much better. After breakfast, he and the brindle London squatting cat played Monopoly on the bed until the cat got cross because he was losing. The old lady was up on the topmost tower, watching the river and the wall through the telescope. The town looked safe and secure. Every day it rained and rained. They lost track of how many days it had been raining. They were out of pickled watermelon and molasses, and they were tired of all of their games and books. The brindle London squatting cat was grumpy all the time. Even the magical mouse got bored and ate a hole in the knitting basket. One day, she woke up, the old lady had a funny feeling. What could it be? Something was different. The whole world was quiet. Then she knew. The rain had stopped. The old lady jumped out of bed just as fast as she could. She put on her knitted snood, her red flannel leggings with the brass buttons, her rubber black galoshes. She didn't even stop to get her artificial fur muff. "Lovely," she said, looking through the bright sunshine sparkling on the wet leaves and grasses. Soon she was joined by all the animals. How glad they were to be outdoors again. It was not long before the river had shrunk to its usual size. The townspeople took away the bags of sand and began building a new bridge. Soon the great rain and flood were almost forgotten. One warm afternoon, the music of a brass band came floating in the windows. My, said the yak, who loved music. They all ran to the front door to see what was happening. When they opened it, there was the mayor, just about to knock. The band struck up a rousing tune. When it was done, the mayor held up his hand for silence, so he could make a speech. "Dear Madame, you were not forgotten," he said to the old lady. "On behalf of all of the people of the town, our heartfelt thanks, I wish to present you with this silver medal." And he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handsome red box, which he handed to the old lady. The band began to play again. "Oh, no, it's not for me. It's for Alexander," said the old lady. When the mayor saw the alligator, he coughed nervously, but the old lady opened the box and took out the beautiful medal and hung it proudly around Alexander's neck. She told the mayor about Alexander's heroic swim. The mayor and Alexander smiled shyly at each other. The mayor even patted Alexander's nose. The band cheered. Then the old lady invited everyone into the drawing room for tea. When finally all of their guests had gone, the old lady and the animals looked at each other. My, said the yak. "That is a lovely medal," said the old lady. "Humph," said the brindle London squatting cat jealously, and off he went to take a nap. Alexander just looked in the mirror and smiled. A tear of joy ran down his cheek. Inside a ball of yarn, the knitting basket, the magical mouse smiled too. The end.